Hello and welcome to the final lesson in this module. Now, in the last lesson, you learned about stateless widgets. In this lesson, you will learn about stateful widgets. Now, what exactly is a stateful widget? Stateful widget is a widget which has state. Now, what do I mean by state? I think it will be best explained with an example. So right now you can see that we are in Dartpad and we have the default Flutter snippet. This is a stateless widget, meaning it is static. You can see it says hello world. If we change it, it will say live world or whatever we change it to. It remains like this forever. It will not change. However, a stateful widget can change over time. We can manipulate it to show something else. So like before, delete everything inside material app. Also delete the const. And inside material app, let's create a new home. And let's call it stateful page. Stateful page with brackets. Now, right now you see an underlined error here. That is because we do not have a stateful page created yet. So let's create a stateful page. So underneath here, let's create class. Stateful page extends stateful widget. So you see right now we have my app, which is a stateless widget, and that stateless widget my app contains a material app, which contains a stateful page, which is a stateful widget. So we have both in this app right now. So let's continue. So all stateful widgets have state. And how do we create state? I will show you. So now we create a stateful page state. For all essential purposes, you just need to remember this line. This line just creates state. And most of the time, it will be created by default. So you don't really need to understand it in depth unless you are really willing to work on Flutter manually. But we are going to mostly work with AI. So just write it down and let's move on. Next, we actually create the stateful page state, which is this one. How do we do that? We create a class and we just copy this stateful page state extends state. Of type stateful page. So we know from our previous examples that every widget has a build function. By the way, let's quickly fix our typo here. So every widget has a build function. Our stateless widget right here has this build function. But stateful widgets do not themselves have a build function. Instead, The build function resides in their state. So let's create the build function for our stateful widget. Widget build. Build context. Context. And curly brackets. So now our stateful widget has build function. And as we know, build functions must return something. And in our case, the build function will return a scaffold. Scaffold is one of the most common widgets that is used in almost all apps. So we return a scaffold, give it a semicolon, and now let's see what else do we want to see in our app. Let's give it an app bar. With the title, which is a text widget called counter app. So let's run it. And we will see that we have an app bar, which is counter app. Let's give it a color. Colors dot cyan. Do not forget the comma. Now we have an app bar with the color cyan, and we reached until this level in the last lesson. So we were able to create an app bar that looked like this in our last lesson, and now we move forward and we create a body. So we add a comma to our app bar and we create a body because that is what a scaffold also takes. And we give it a center widget. Now a center widget keeps everything in the center of the screen, whatever our screen is, whether it's a mobile or a web page, it will keep everything in the center. And our center has a child widget, which is a column. So I know right now it's overwhelming for you, but trust me, as time goes on, you will get very, very competent at this. So a column can actually have multiple children. Let's give it children, which is an array. Let the first child be a text which shows times breast. And let's quickly run it. We get an error. So I missed the comma here. It's very common with Flutter to miss commas. But there we go. We see now times breast goes up. So next, after our text, let's add a sized box. Of height 10. So after our sized box, let's create another text and give it a random value. Could be anything. Do not forget the comma and let's run it. And you see now we have a sized box in between our top text and our random text. Now, a quick tip, when you click on one bracket or you click next to it, you will see the other opposing bracket highlighted as well. So you can click on it and see the other opposing bracket as well. So if we click on center, this is the other bracket of center. If we click on scaffold, this is the other bracket of scaffold. So I want you to go to before the scaffold bracket, right? Right here and click enter and now give it another widget. Now a scaffold takes a floating action button. So we give it a floating action button parameter. And what it takes is a floating action button widget. And this button, this widget, takes on pressed. An on pressed function, which right now we're just going to give it a null value. And let's click run again. And there you see in the right bottom corner, we now have a floating action button, although it does not do anything right now and it doesn't show anything, but let's give it an icon so it looks beautiful. So it has a child parameter and it takes icon, and let's give it an icons dot add. Run it again and we see now we have a plus icon, but it does not do anything right now because our on pressed is null. So right now when we tap on it or click on it, nothing happens. This is what we are going to fix next. So right now this is a stateful widget, but we have no state. So let's say in this random text, I want to display my state. First, I will create my state. So go up here in the stateful page state. After the curly bracket, press enter. And now we are going to create a variable to hold our state. As you remember, variables are just buckets or boxes which hold some data. So now we are going to create a new variable. Let's call it int counter. And let's give it the value 0. Don't forget semicolon. So now we have created in our state a variable which holds our state of 0. And we call this variable counter. So actually our state right now is counter. Now, if we want to display the state, we can use these widgets to display it. Let's change our random widget to display our counter state. Let's change it to random, delete it, and type dollar sign, counter, and click run. You see, now we get 0. So right now our state is being displayed by our widget right here. So how do we change the state? That is our next question. How do we manipulate state? We have a floating action button which can change our state. That's what we want, right? How do we do that? So we need to create a function that changes or manipulates our state. So let's create a function. So because this function will not return anything, it will be a void function. So if you remember how we create functions in Dart is name of the function. Let's call it increment counter. Sounds better. Increment counter parameters, which we have none. And then curly brackets. Now let's change our state here. Let's do counter is equal to counter plus 1, right? And now let's take this function and let's call it onPressed. So what have we done right here? We have created a new function called increment counter. In this function, we increase the value of counter by 1, and we have now assigned this function to our floating action button right here. So let's run it and let's see if it works. I'm pressing it. You can see that it is being pressed, but the counter is not changing. Why is that? That is because Flutter itself has a feature called set state. You cannot just create state anywhere and change it from anywhere. That will be chaos. So Flutter itself has by default a function called set state, and that is what is used to manage state. So how do we implement that? In our increment counter function, we create that state function. So we write set state Now this is our set state function. Any state that is changed inside this function will be persisted, will be manipulated. State can only be changed inside set state function. Now, as you will continue, you will learn more and advanced ways, but right now, this is how you remember. Any state that we change must be changed inside set state. So, how do we do that? We create what is called an anonymous function. This is an anonymous function because it has the syntax of a function but no name. So it's called anonymous. And inside this function, we change our state. So we cut and we paste inside set state. And now we run it again. Moment of truth. Aha, now our state is being manipulated. Every time we press the floating action button, our counter goes up. So we can also do it, let's say 5. Let's run it. 15, 20, 25. Now we see that it always starts from 0. That is because our initial state in the counter variable is 0. If we set it to, let's say, 20 and run it again, we see that our default now is 20. That does not really make sense, but we can do it for different cases. The point is, whatever we set our initial state as, that is what our state will remain. So set it back to 0. We run it again. Now it's 0 again. If we want to increase it by 5, we increase it by 5. We want to increase it by 2, and increase it by 2. See, 25, 27. Now, this is actually a very good example because this is the default example, the default app that is created with our project. When we run the command flutter create, it's exactly this example, only small changes that I have made to explain it to you better. We can actually look at it right now. Open a new Dartpad page, dartpad.dev, and go to samples and click on counter and run the counter app. See, it's exactly the same, except we have our own counter widget. We have a blue app bar. We have slightly different changes, but it's exactly the same code. It has a floating action button. It has an increment counter. You can actually look at it, and now you will understand this code much, much better. So that was it for our lesson. We learned many new widgets. We learned how state is managed. Remember, set state is a golden function, and you will use it a lot. And so we manage state with set state, and that's it. See you in the next module. Goodbye.